Hello and welcome back to Autistic BookTube. I'm your host who says things, Tim, and today we're talking contemporary novels that tackle gender and sexuality. Specifically, that's atypical gender and sexuality, meaning queer, trans, and non-binary, because I'm those things too. Did you know that autistic people are more likely than non-autistic people to identify as queer, trans, or non-binary? Did you know LGBTQ folks are more likely to be autistic? Or that it's like 8 times more likely? Or how about that there's terms like outisexual and outigender to demonstrate how inseparable autism is from gender and sexuality for some people? Anyway, let's look at some fiction that's non-normative both in terms of neurotype and also gender identity. I do have some honorable mentions first before I get to my list of 5, and here they are. 1. The Boy with a Bird in His Chest by Emme Lund. Why is it on this list? Because there's a whole lot of loneliness and feeling like an outsider here, plus a literal bird in a boy's literal chest, which he must protect. It's a queer coming-of-age story that felt uneven in its pacing and voice, in my opinion. I didn't love it. It felt way longer than it needed to be, but I think a lot of people might fall in love with it, and have already fallen in love. 2. Annie Man by Amber Tamblyn. Very readable, but very difficult, and very compelling. It's a story of a serial rapist who's a woman and preys on men. It blends genres and asks a lot of questions, and is focused ultimately on healing and community in the wake of trauma, but it is graphic, let me tell you. Worth engaging with, however, I thought it was very, very good. It's written from the perspective of the men. And finally, 3, Rethinking Normal by Rainn Hill, a memoir about a young person's gender reassignment and transition. I liked this one. I read it with an atypical kind of outsider student I taught back when I taught high school. Good for teenagers and adults alike then. Were it fiction, in fact, I'd have put it on the list, which begins now. Okay, so first on the list, at number 1, we have Nevada by Imogen Binnie. And this, boy, what a beginning. You have a very sexy start. It just jumps right in there. The main character, or one of them because there's 2, is in bed with a lover and simply can't get out of their own head. You can read these initial spicy chapters on Electric Literature actually for free, and I suggest you do. The link to that is below. As a whole though, the novel follows Maria, who's trans punk and works in a bookstore. When she and her girlfriend break up, she spirals a little and ends up on this cross-country road trip that leads her to Nevada, where she meets James, the other main character, who's very likely trans but doesn't realize it yet. Will Maria guide this young, possibly trans girl into adulthood and self-acceptance then? Will the connection prevail? Well, I'll tell you, this thing ends pretty abruptly. I listened to the audiobook and was very confused when the credits rolled, as it were, because there was still like an hour left in the recording. Turns out that last chapter was a kind of reflective piece by the author upon the novel being reprinted. So yeah, I was not expecting the ending we got, but it's a cult classic for a reason and inspired some of the other books on this list. It's short, it's fast, it's painfully self-aware, and it deserves your attention. Okay, so number 2, and maybe my favorite on this list, is Torrey Peters' Detransition Baby, about Reese, a trans woman, her ex Ames, who detransitioned to live as a man and in the process lost his romantic relationship with Reese, and also Katrina, Ames's boss and lover, who gets pregnant with Ames's baby and isn't sure that she wants to keep it. So the core tension of the novel, and really just a fantastic hook, is that Reese does want a child, and thus crops up this tentative plan to keep the baby and all kind of raise it together. These characters are stuck, man, and intense, and there's just so much uncertainty all around. Everyone is afforded incredible multitudes, pain, joy, yearning, mistakes. They're all imperfect and messy, and it's grand. I love novels that imagine different modes of being and different approaches to family and bonds and love. I also love novels that play with popular culture. This one considers at length Friends, a TV show I've watched over and over, and Laura Jane Grace from Against Me, a band I've listened to over and over. This novel just doesn't care about ever making you comfortable, and I really appreciate that. All the praise it got is well-deserved, and Torrey Peters has a new book coming out, and that's awesome. Number 3 then is Little Fish by Casey Plett, a Canadian writer. This one follows Wendy, a trans woman in her 30s who discovers evidence that her Mennonite grandfather might have actually been transgender too. It's kind of a follow my family history type of plot line with snags and obstacles along the way as Wendy struggles to help friends, earn money, and remember to take hormones. Lots of stuff. So I remember one scene where she has sex with someone for money, and I thought it was such a nuanced, generous portrait of sex work, and also racy, but in like a way you might not expect, and also tender. Anyway, Little Fish has a ton of heart, which is probably why it won so many awards. It starts with Wendy and her friends talking about trans age, which was a thing I'd not heard of before, but I like that as an introduction to the novel as a whole, that it's a piece of writing that's immediately going to deconstruct common wisdom about how your world works. It's going to question the paradigms, the paradigms. It's an indie book kind of, but reads more upmarket to me. I don't know, I feel like this should be more popular than it is. Also, Plett wrote a very, very good essay about transness and writing that's on LitHub, and the link is below. All right, number 4, Paul Takes the Form of a Mortal Girl by Andrea Lawlor. I know, right? Catchy title. I feel like all the covers for this are pink, and I like that. The novel feels very pink to me. Does anyone else assign colors to novels based on their mood and ethos and concept? Paul Takes is pink, man. Like a dark pink. That's what its themes are. Pink. Little Fish is like navy, almost black. Anyway, it's not super concrete by design, but Paul is gender and sex fluid. His body changes. The marketing copy calls him a shapeshifter. And with his shape-shifting body, he travels around into different queer spaces and haunts and around the country, from Iowa to the East Coast and West. He cruises and has anonymous sex and thinks a great deal. Just thinks and thinks and thinks, while also kind of half pursuing, half serendipitously running into this person he repeatedly calls the youth. The youth! Is this queer on the road? Is that a silly thing to say? Paul Takes feels like Nevada to me, kind of, but of course it's also totally different. I didn't quite connect with this one as much, but it's good, and for good reason it found its audience. And finally, at number 5, we have Luna by Julie Ann Peters. I read this years before I read any of the other books on this list. And at the time, pre-diagnosis, etc., I would often think, what should I read to learn more and broaden my perspective and expand my horizons? Also, where should I donate my money and who can I support? I often settled on trans-related texts, causes, whatever, and this was the first novel I selected. It's 20 years old now. If I Was Your Girl or This Is How It Always Is might be more, current and updated options. But Luna really struck me. I felt ashamed reading it in a way, like I don't ever remember talking about it to other people. It's a young adult piece and told from the perspective of Reagan, sister of Liam/Luna, her trans sister, who's not out and is holding on to this secret and is feeling trapped and on and on and on. So you can sort of see the issue, maybe, that the transness is seen through this cis lens, like it's Reagan's voice capturing the feelings, not Luna's, and we're denied access that would be beneficial and more relevant probably. But I suppose at the time I needed that distance and lens, I'm not sure. I think the ending is predictable, but I found it surprising and powerful. and it's kind of lingering in me. I do recommend this novel. It's worth noting that it was a National Book Award finalist. Not that awards are indicative of what's really culturally necessary. It's not what we need in terms of representation in 2024, but not everything we read needs to be what we need in 2024, I guess. Also, anything set in basements, I don't know, they get to me. Okay, so I'll leave it at that for now. One thing I think all these novels do well is foreground the questioning period related to non-normative gender and sexual expression, the wondering, the shame, the ambivalence, the realization, the questioning again, and then the obsessive analysis of experience and possibility, like what happened when I thought I was autistic and then learned I was. Gender is like a special interest in these books. And as someone who didn't understand their gender shit until they understood their autistic shit, I can say it all felt really familiar to me. I wrote a story about transness and autism, by the way, and Korea, and marriage, and cats, and coffee, and I'll link to it in the video description if you care to read it. I'd appreciate it if you did. Craft, a fine magazine, published it, and it's free to read online, and it's short. It takes like 15 minutes. And really, that's it. Thank you for being here. As always, have you read these? Did you like them? Did you notice it's mostly trans women on here? Do you agree we need more fiction about trans men? Hang on, I know one. Peter Darling by Chant. I love Peter Pan. That novel feels autistic too.